I was always overlooked and undervalued by my parents. After my divorce, they exploited me financially and treated my son as if he were a burden. I'm a 42-year-old woman working as an emergency room physician at a large hospital in Boston. As a single mother to my 7-year-old son, Ethan, I feel the need to express something that has been troubling me for decades regarding my family dynamics, particularly my parents' behavior and its impact on my life. When I was 5 years old, my sister, Chloe, was born. Our parents told me that I would be a big sister and that it would be wonderful to have a lifelong companion. They never mentioned that I would become invisible in our household. Every morning, my mother would prepare Chloe's breakfast to order 2 eggs sunny side up, toast cut diagonally, just the way her princess liked it, while tossing me a box of cereal without even looking at me. The contrasts were stark throughout our daily lives. In elementary school, my mother would spend hours helping Chloe with her homework, gently explaining each problem. When I sought assistance, the response was always the same: "You're smart enough to figure it out on your own." They attended all of Chloe's soccer games, cheering enthusiastically from the sidelines, but always had prior engagements when I had science competitions. When I needed braces, my father complained about the cost for months. Each dentist appointment was accompanied by sighs and murmured remarks about expenses. 2 years later, when Chloe needed braces as well, money suddenly became no object. They even got her the beautiful clear ones I had requested but was denied. "It's an investment in her confidence," my mother told her book club friends, as if my confidence didn't matter. My academic achievements were met with indifference. Straight A's in advanced science classes elicited distracted nods, while Chloe's B+ in regular math prompted a celebratory dinner at her favorite restaurant downtown. During parent-teacher conferences, they barely listened when my teachers praised my outstanding performance in biology and chemistry, but beamed with pride when Chloe's teachers highlighted her participation in class discussions. Birthday celebrations became a painful reminder of our differing status within the family. My parties were simple affairs: store-bought cake and a few friends in the backyard, if I was lucky enough to have one at all. Chloe's celebrations were extravagant events, complete with bouncy houses, hired entertainers, custom-made cakes, and elaborate themes. One year, they even hired a professional event planner. I once overheard my mother telling a friend, "Well, Chloe just appreciates these things more. Our older one is too practical." Those remarks stung, but I learned to ignore them. The hardest part was watching Chloe change from a wonderful child into someone I barely recognized. In our childhood, we used to build blanket forts and create funny stories about fantastic adventures. However, years of being treated as if she could do no wrong took their toll. By middle school, she had become exactly what one would expect. "Where's my blue sweater?" she would demand, rummaging through my closet without permission. "That's mine. Mom bought it for my birthday." I would protest. "Well, I need it for Jessica's party," she would explain. "Don't be selfish, let your sister borrow it," my mother would often say. My belongings became communal property, while I was not allowed to touch anything that belonged to Chloe. I learned to pick my battles, expect nothing, and seek validation elsewhere. School became my refuge. While Chloe was praised for her role in the school play, where she had 2 lines, I was quietly winning science fairs and devising my escape plan. I joined every academic club I could find, volunteered at the local hospital, and spent my summers conducting research internships. My guidance counselor became my greatest ally, helping me apply for scholarships and providing glowing recommendations. I was overjoyed when my acceptance letter to Harvard Medical School arrived, along with a full scholarship. Finally, I thought, they would have to recognize my accomplishments. I waited until dinner to share the news, hoping for a celebration. Instead, Chloe dominated the evening with a dramatic retelling of her 7th grade student council election campaign. "I got a full scholarship to Harvard Medical School," I said during a rare pause. "That's nice, honey," my mother replied. "Chloe, sweetie, tell us more about your campaign posters." Medical school became my sanctuary during those early years. I only returned home for major holidays, and even then, I counted the minutes until I could escape. Every visit was the same. Chloe's accomplishments were highlighted while my dean's list standings and prestigious internship offers received little attention. I immersed myself in my studies, excelling in emergency medicine rotations and receiving excellent referrals from renowned doctors. In my third year, I began an emergency medicine rotation at Massachusetts General Hospital, where I met Ryan. He was a medical device sales representative showcasing new trauma equipment to the department. Despite my usual cautious remain, devoted grandparents to Ethan and their daughter, Mia, became the aunt my sister never was. Every time we visited their home, Ethan would light up and dash straight to the toy zone they had set up just for him. Tom would get down on the floor to play with trucks, while Mia always had a new game or craft project planned. My own parents' home was a stark contrast. I tried to visit them occasionally, hoping they would want to bond with their only granddaughter, but their indifference was heartbreaking to witness. "Don't let him touch that vase," my mother would say, barely glancing up from her magazine. "And make sure he doesn't run around too much, he'll scratch the hardwood floors." Ethan would cling to my leg, sensing the cold atmosphere. The contrast became even more pronounced when Chloe showed up during our visits. "Here's my successful girl," my father would beam as Chloe walked in, discussing her new job at a trading company. They would completely disregard Ethan's attempts to show them his latest drawing, instead focusing on Chloe's every word about workplace politics and client meetings. I need to provide updates regarding recent events that have made me re-evaluate my relationship with my parents. It's still fresh, and I need time to process everything. For now, my focus is on my son and the family members who would show me the true meaning of unconditional love. Update number 1, thank you all for your encouraging words. I've gathered my thoughts and wanted to discuss how things changed after the divorce, particularly regarding my career and my parents' behavior following Ryan's departure. I threw myself into my work at the ER, taking on the most challenging cases, those that other doctors typically avoided. Last year, there was one particularly tough case, a patient with multiple traumas and a complicated medical history. 3 previous hospitals had transferred him because they deemed him too risky. I spent 16 hours stabilizing him and collaborating with various doctors, and he pulled through. This instance piqued the interest of the department head, Dr. Mitchell. He called me into his office one morning. "I've been following your performance. How do you feel about leading our new trauma response team?" It meant increased responsibility, longer hours, and a significant pay raise. I agreed without hesitation. The team's success rate under my leadership exceeded expectations. We reduced critical response times by 30% and achieved the highest survival rate in the hospital's history. My research papers on emergency trauma protocols were published in top medical journals. Then came the promotion to senior attending physician, complete with a corner office and a salary that brought tears to my eyes. With my newfound financial stability, I purchased a lovely 3-bedroom apartment in a great school district. Ethan was thrilled to have his own room. "Mom, can I paint the walls blue like the ocean?" he asked, his eyes sparkling. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied. "We can do whatever you want." That weekend, Tom and Mia helped us paint, turning it into a family project. Betty brought baked cookies, and we ended up with more paint on ourselves than on the walls. This was when my parents' relationship with me began to shift. It started with casual inquiries about my new lifestyle. My mother began calling more frequently, asking about Ethan and arranging weekend visits. Initially, I was cautiously optimistic, perhaps they wanted to be true grandparents to Ethan. The first visit seemed promising. My mother actually got down on the floor to play with Ethan's train set, something I had never seen her do before. My father even bought him a new toy truck. But then the requests began to trickle in. "The refrigerator is making strange noises," they would say. "The bathroom needs some repairs." Each time, they would mention how tight their finances were and how they couldn't possibly afford it alone. I agreed to help, recalling all the dance classes and summer camps they had paid for Chloe but had denied me. Each request was followed by brief moments of focused attention on Ethan. They would invite us to dinner, ask about his school, and express interest in his life, but it never lasted long. Meanwhile, Ethan was thriving at his new school. His teacher informed me that he was exceptionally bright, particularly in science, just like his mom. Mia beamed at the parent-teacher conference we attended together, but my parents were too preoccupied that day. Every Wednesday, Mia would pick him up from school and take him to science club, which she started after noticing his interest in my medical books. Tom and Betty have been constants in our lives. They come over every Sunday for family dinner, and Betty has been teaching Ethan how to bake. Last week, they made chocolate chip cookies together, and Ethan boldly declared, "I want to be both a doctor and a baker when I grow up." My parents' financial needs escalated to include a new water heater and house renovations. Then came the biggest request. "Sweetie," my father called one Sunday, "your mother and I the recovery room, groggy and disoriented." As I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Avery had come through for me, as she always did. I could only imagine how frantic she must have been to rearrange her plans for me. The thought of her taking care of Ethan while I recovered filled me with gratitude, but it also deepened the ache in my heart regarding my own parents. When I was finally coherent enough to sit up, I reached for my phone, hoping to see a message from Avery. Instead, I found a missed call from my mother. I hesitated before calling her back, my heart racing with a mix of anxiety and anger. What could she possibly want after the way she had treated me? I took a deep breath and dialed her number. "Hello," she answered, her tone casual, as if nothing had happened. "Mom, I just got out of surgery." "I called you earlier from the hospital," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, yes, I saw that. I hope everything went well," she replied, her voice lacking any real concern. "I was just about to call you back. We had a lovely evening at Abigail's promotion party. She was so excited to share the news with everyone. I felt my blood boil. Mom, I was in the hospital. I needed help with Ethan, and you chose to ignore my call because you were busy with Abigail's party?" Now, don't be dramatic," she said dismissively. "You know how important this was for Abigail. She's worked so hard for this promotion. Besides, you have Avery to help you, don't you?" "Yes, I do, but that's not the point. You're his grandparents. You should want to be there for him, for me." I could feel the frustration bubbling over, and I struggled to keep my voice down. "Sweetheart, you need to understand that we have our own lives too. Abigail is our priority right now," she said, her tone icy. "You're an adult, and you can handle things on your own." I hung up, feeling a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. The realization that my parents would never change hit me like a ton of bricks. They had always prioritized Chloe, and now Abigail, over me and my son. I had spent years trying to earn their love and approval, only to find that it was conditional on my success and financial contributions. As I lay in the recovery room, I thought about the stark contrast between my parents and Tom and Betty. They had stepped in without hesitation, showing me what true support looked like. They had always been there for Ethan, showering him with love and attention, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for their presence in our lives. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I returned home to find Avery waiting for me with a warm smile and a plate of homemade cookies. "How are you feeling?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me in a comforting hug. "I'm okay, just a bit overwhelmed," I admitted, sinking onto the couch. I can't believe how my parents reacted. It's like they don't even care. Avery sat down beside me, her expression serious. "You know, you don't owe them anything. You've built a life for yourself and Ethan, and you've done it all on your own. They've made their choices, and it's time for you to focus on the people who truly care about you." Her words resonated deeply within me. I had spent so long trying to fit into a mold that my parents had created, hoping to gain their approval. But now, I realized that I needed to prioritize my own happiness and the well-being of my son. In the days that followed, I focused on my recovery and spent quality time with Ethan and Avery. We played games, watched movies, and baked together. I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I began to understand that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who show up for you, who love you unconditionally, and who support you through thick and thin. As I returned to work at the hospital, I poured my energy into my patients and my team. I found solace in the chaos of the ER, where I could make a difference in people's lives. I also started to set boundaries with my parents. I would no longer allow their demands to dictate my life or my relationship with Ethan. One evening, as I was tucking Ethan into bed, he looked up at me with his big, innocent eyes. "Mom, can we paint the walls blue like the ocean again?" he asked, his voice filled with hope. I smiled, feeling a warmth in my heart. "Of course, sweetheart. We can do whatever you want." In that moment, I realized that I was creating a new legacy for Ethan 1. I woke up from recovery, still disoriented from the anesthesia, and my first conscious thought was about Ethan. As I reached for my phone, I noticed a text message from Avery waiting for me. "Ethan is having a blast. We made pizza and created a blanket fort. Max is on guard. Don't worry about anything other than getting better." She sent me pictures over the next 2 days, showing Ethan helping her bake cookies, falling asleep in a pile of plush animals, and building Lego hospitals just like the one where mommy works. When I was finally discharged, Avery took me home, having already stocked my fridge, scheduled a cleaning service, and set up a cozy recovery area in my living room. As I walked in, Ethan ran to embrace me, stopping just short when he realized I was still sore. "Aunt Avery let me help make breakfast every morning, and Max slept in my blanket fort," he declared triumphantly. The next day, while I was recovering, I stumbled upon dozens of images from Chloe's promotion celebration, which had been posted on the same day I had my surgery. My parents were beaming beside Chloe in her expensive dress, champagne toasts in hand, and an exquisite cake that must have cost a fortune. Everyone was laughing and celebrating while I lay in a hospital bed, their grandson disregarded as a burden. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I sat down at my computer. First, I canceled the automatic monthly transfer to my parents' account for their car payment, and then I blocked them on all social media platforms. Looking at the framed photo on my desk of Ethan and me in the park, laughing together while Max chased bubbles around us, I felt something shift inside me. I had been trying to buy my parents' love with money and tolerance for years, but real family, real love, was Avery flying back from her conference without hesitation, Tom and Betty FaceTiming Ethan every night while on their cruise, and Max the dog guarding my son's blanket fort while I was in the hospital. I needed some time to process everything, but I promised to post another update soon. For now, I was focusing on my recovery and being present for my son. The hospital granted me 2 weeks of medical leave, and Avery insisted on staying with us until I was back on my feet. Yesterday, she helped Ethan decorate my recovery room with his science fair paintings to make it pretty, just like the hospital. "But better because it has my art," he stated proudly. The realization that my son had never experienced the kind of conditional love I grew up with made all of this worthwhile. He understood that he was loved for who he was, rather than what he could contribute, and that may be the greatest gift of all. I promised to post update 3 shortly on what happened when my parents discovered their monthly car payments had stopped, but for now, I needed to relax and enjoy this tranquil time with my true family. Update 3, first and foremost, I want to express my gratitude to everyone for their encouraging comments and messages, which helped me persevere through what followed. As many of you predicted, my parents did not take the cancelled car payments well. It began with a flood of voicemails and texts, each more desperate than the last. I blocked their numbers, but they started using different phones. The messages ranged from guilt-tripping, "How could you do this to your own parents?" to angry threats, "We'll tell everyone you're an ungrateful daughter," to tearful pleas, "We're going to lose the car because of you." There was no mention of Ethan in any of the messages, and there was no apology for how they treated us during my hospitalization. Everything was about them, their demands, their car, their feelings, their social status. Then came the flying monkeys. Distant relatives and family acquaintances began calling to tell me how I had broken my parents' hearts. "They're getting older," my Aunt Susan admonished. "It's your duty as their daughter to help them." I wanted to question where their sense of duty was when their grandson needed them, but instead, I simply blocked those numbers. Last Sunday, I was sitting in our backyard, watching Ethan and Max play fetch while Avery grilled burgers for lunch when a car I didn't recognize drove into my driveway. My mother stepped out with her best church social smile. "Paula, sweetheart," she shouted, using my first name, which she only did when she wanted something. "How are you? We've been worried since you stopped returning our calls." I stayed seated, keeping my voice quiet for Ethan's sake. "What do you want, Mom?" She sat on the edge of a patio chair and smoothed her fashionable skirt. "Well, since you asked, your father and I are in a bit of a predicament with the vehicle payments," she began, letting out that theatrical sigh I knew so well. "You see, we assumed Chloe would help us with her new position.